Oh, this is so nice. Adirondack chairs are still probably the most comfortable outdoor furniture. And this one comes with a twist. Not only does it have a stylish side table, but it also has a footrest that keeps your feet up. It makes it easier to get in and out of. And lastly, you're a little bit higher so that you can look out over the fence rail into the yard. It's all made out of 1-inch material, in this case cedar. And the nice part is when neighbors and friends and family see it, they're all going to want one. And we made these using templates. Let me show you how to do it. Most of the chair and table are made with straight lumber, but it's these curved parts on the seat assembly that give the Adirondack chair its style and its comfort. If you're going to be making multiples of these, I would suggest you take the time up front to make patterns. And these patterns will save you an awful lot of time later on when you're making all those multiple pieces. You'll see two ways that woodworking publishers present template patterns. I've downloaded and printed off full-size patterns to make my templates. But if the publisher doesn't provide full-size templates, or maybe just gridded versions, you'll have to make your own in large versions. There's a couple different options. You can make your own gridded paper, you can buy gridded paper. I actually found it on the back of some wrapping paper. Both of those options work really well. These are 6 of them that you'll be making. Once those are made, they're transferred to a piece of MDF or hardboard and used to create multiple patterns. One chair is never going to be enough. You'll need these. It's time to make them and get started on the chairs. So let's start with the left arm pattern. This is an actual template. Pattern's on the top, and I've converted that from just the pattern to a full template. And all I'm going to do is lay this out on my stock. There's a couple of ways to do this. It makes it easy to put a pencil mark in here so that I can see what I'm cutting. But you'll notice on cedar and other woods, there's a lot of inclusions. Here's a knot on this side, fairly clean on this side. And if I use my pattern this way, I can cover that knot. But if I use the pattern this way, I can actually remove that knot. So again, I'll do this on all of the pattern work, any place that I can, to maximize the amount of clear space on here. So once the pattern is set, like this, I'll mark its edges. Like so. So now you can remove this waste with a jigsaw or scroll saw and use a drum sander or spindle sander to clean up those rough edges. Or you can go and put this template back on with double face tape and use the router to clean up that edge. But the first thing is going to the bandsaw, and that's where I'm headed. Keeping in mind that these are mirror images, I've routed a 1/4-inch roundover on the top edges of both the left and right arms. Then finally, routed an 1/8-inch roundover on the bottoms all the way around. For the next 3 pieces, I've done the same thing as I did with the arm. I've placed the pattern, cut it on the bandsaw, and cleaned up the rough edges. This one is for the side rail, this one's for the rear slat, and this is the arm bracket. 2 of these patterns are cut just a bit differently. They're both using the same template system, and I'm still going to use those to line up my cut lines like so. But this particular cut line now is at a 15-degree angle, not the 90 we've been using. So you have 2 options there. The first is you can use a jigsaw like this, and you can actually turn the foot on it to go 15 degrees. I've made a small little block to kind of secondarily check that. So again, I can use this, or I can set the bandsaw to 15 degrees, and that's what I'm going to use. Now I'm double checking the bandsaw setting at 15 degrees and using that setting to cut the backrest lower rail and then finally the backrest upper rail. And that completes the cutting and shaping work on all of the templates. So these are all the parts necessary for making one chair and one table. And really all the machining that's left to do is at the miter saw and a little bit at the router table. So once I get done there, we'll start our assembly. We'll start the chair build with this leg assembly, which consists of angled legs, a lower and upper frame, and a footrest. The legs are angled at 7 degrees, so I've moved the miter saw to the right and left it there. So by lining up the bottom corner, I make the cut, and then flip these end for end and make the cut at the other side. That way I'm always working off one side of the miter. And I'll complete all 8 legs that way. Now at the router table, using an 1/8 inch roundover bit, I've rounded over the bottoms and up the sides of each of the 8 legs. I'll start by assembling the upper and lower frames using simple glue and screw construction. Once the glue cures, it's time to place the frames on the legs. This is where it gets a little bit tricky. So the first thing is I've got a 6-inch spacer board in the back here. And I want the bottom edge of these legs equal with the spacer board and that entire assembly even with the back edge of the workbench. On one side, I'm just going to lay that out, and I've done that on this edge. But on this side, I want to slide that entire thing this way until 4 3/4 of an inch from the outside edge here to the inside edge here aligns with that leg. So again, it just means moving that leg from there over to here, and once I clamp it, it's even on the back, on both sides. This edge is right up against the outside edge of the leg, and this leg is up against that line. That's exactly how it goes together. This will then be glued and screwed in 2 places. I'm using a 14-inch spacer. I'm going to put it flat on this lower frame and move the upper frame into position. And I want it top edge even with the leg on the back, and use that same space on the right. I'll put a pencil mark in both those spots so I know where to glue. And then when I do this, I'll do this side first, nice and firmly, but just put 1 screw in. And on this side, I'll make sure that I can locate this nice and firm and put a screw in on this side, and then finish up with the second one in both. That's how to lay out the top of this frame onto the legs. Now it's time to place the footrest. It needs to overhang the front edge by 1/4 of an inch. And I need to round over the sides, front, and bottom edge. With that done, applying a little glue and 4 screws, and the footrest is attached. Next, we'll build a seat assembly by adding the arms and the upper and lower backrest rails. It's the curves that provide the comfort for the back slats, and then we fill out the balance with equally spaced seat slats. Now I'm beginning by attaching the left arm, and I'm using this with the template facing up, and I'll be using that same template to locate the holes for future attachment. Now the actual attachment is a little tricky. The arm sits 4 inches from the front of the leg, and I've attached a small scrap block to establish that distance. The inside edges of the arm are 1 inch away from the inside edges of the leg, both front and back. Now I put glue on the tops of both legs and position the arm using that scrap block. I know that the first digit of my finger is 1 inch, so I've used that to measure the inside edge in both the front and the back of the leg. And finally, drill the holes and attach the arm with screws. Now to place the right arm, I've turned the pattern upside down because this arm is a mirror image of the left. And then I use the same process to attach that arm to the legs. I'm installing the backrest upper rail first. I've temporarily positioned the backrest upper rail on the ends of each arm and then trace the profile of that arm onto that back rail. Now I'll trim that off with the bandsaw and sand off any rough edges. I've trimmed the edges flush, applied a little glue, and put clamps on both sides to hold it. Now I'm using 2 screws on either side to attach the rail to the underside of the arms. Now to apply the backrest lower rail, I've just added glue to the top edges of the seat supports. Now with 4 screws, 2 in each corner, that supports the rail. Using the marks I previously penciled out with the left and right arm patterns, I'm now attaching the arm brackets with 1.5 inch screws and glue. To put the back slats in place, I first drilled a center hole near the bottom of each slat. And working from the middle, I attached the first slat centered on the bottom and the top rail. The balance of rails are attached the same way, making sure that the spacing between each one at the bottom is 1/4 inch and even across the spacing on the top edge. The design of this chair also calls for the back slats to be radiused. So the way I found that's really easy to do it is I just take a string and I hold it in the center of the middle slat at the very bottom. And then at the very top, I pull it taut and using a pencil at that end, scribe a line from the very center of that middle slat down both left and right to create the radius. Now that the scribe lines are in place, I want to make sure that I replace each one of those slats in order. So I've marked them on the back sides. Now I'll remove the screws and take each one of these slats to the bandsaw, the drum sander, and the router table to finish all the detailing. The slats are put back in the order they were taken off by using a little bit of glue and replacing the screws, both the bottom and the middle. I prepared the seat slats for installation by rounding over all the upper edges on the router table. Now the pieces are laid out with similar spacing between them, glued and screwed to the base support. The only change I made to the round over was on the last piece. On the front edge of that piece, I chamfered it at 45 to ease the transition to make it softer when sitting. The table is assembled much the same way as the chair's leg assembly. The upper and lower frames are attached to the 4 legs, which are then topped with slats. Now to place the bottom bracket, that goes on the very bottom edge here. It's also going to be 6 inches up, but there's no way to use a square there because there's nothing to kind of square this to. So I just made a 6-inch block for myself, made sure I lined it up with the bottom edge of that leg, and put a pencil mark there. And I did the same thing on this edge. So now I've got a reference point to place those legs. The upper frame is just going to be even with the top edge of that leg and the outside of this touching here, and the same on the other side. Now after putting some glue on the top legs on each side, I'm placing the top frame. And I'm just putting a single screw in there to hold that position. Now moving to the bottom frame. I already have my 6-inch index marks, and I'll place the bottom frame the same as I did the top, making sure that I've got a very small reveal to the front edge of both those legs. And again, put a single screw in there. Once I'm sure that all of my alignment's correct, I'll set a second screw in each one of those openings to fully secure those frames to the legs. Now I'll turn the assembly over and attach those frames to the second set of legs exactly the way I did the first. Now it's time to place the tabletop slats. I've assembled all 6 of them here. They're spaced by 1/4 of an inch, so I just used some tempered hardboard for that. I've gotten them close to where I want them to go, but I know that each end overhangs the side by about 4.5 inches. And rather than measure each one of them, I'm using a block like this to do that. So all I'm going to do is set my block on there and move these forward or backwards that same 4.5 inches, like so. Can't do that with the inner and outer ones. I just will move those in their space. So now I know that the overhang is correct, and the width of this to get that, all I'm doing is using my fingers right on the very edge here and feeling about the same distance on each side, front to back. So I know that my whole setup now is centered. Now to begin this, I'm going to put a screw in each board here, in the front here, and on this end to kind of pre-position them. Now this particular project calls for an arch across each end. And I found that if I make a mark on both sides and create that arch, I get a very pleasant decorative edge. The easiest way to do that arch is with what's called a fairing stick, and this is it here. It's just a material that's 1 inch wide and about 1/8 of an inch thick, and it's fairly flexible. And so what I want to do is I'd like to put one end of this up against my mark on one side and one on the other, and I want the top edge of this to be even with the center of the place that I'm planning on putting that arch. This particular one's got a catch in the back to allow me to do that so that this can be done with just 2 hands. The process is really easy. All I'm going to do is draw a line. I'll do the same at the opposite end to make this look consistent, and then these get cut and sanded to a perfect arch. I put the slats back on in the order that I took them off. I'm attaching the first one with glue and screws, and once I'm sure that's lined up, I'll use a spacer again to set 2 through 6 so that all the spacing is perfect. On any piece of furniture that has 4 legs, you hope that they all hit the ground at the same time. This one's got a bit of a pitch to it, and it's really easy to fix. This edge and the opposite one hit the ground first. So all I've done here is I've double stick taped a piece of 80 grit sandpaper to a known flat surface. And all I need to do then is move that longer edged leg onto it and make a couple of passes back and forth. That will remove enough material that this will sit perfectly. It's an easy fix. Well, I couldn't help myself. I had to come and take a seat because this is really comfortable. Now, final sanding will get this ready for your finish of choice. I would prefer an outdoor penetrating oil finish. And because friends and family are going to see this and want one, I'm so glad that I made this with templates.